the Focusrite Group, and we're here today to take a look at the Oberheim OB-X8 with Matt Johnson from Jamiroquai. So just want to sort of give people a bit of a heads up on the unit. Is everyone already familiar with the Oberheim OB-X8? Yes? No? Show of hands? Yeah, one. Yeah, basically we've got a real classics come back to, been worked on really hard by Tom Oberheim, Marcus Ryle, and the late Dave Smith as well. We were Focusrite Groups basically acquired the Oberheim logo and branding, and were able to sort of get Tom Oberheim to work really hard with us to deliver the OB-X8. Now, the OB-X8 obviously really builds on the OB-X, the OB-X8 and the OB-8, and also kind of creates itself into a whole new instrument as well, letting you customise it as you would like to, really. So delving a bit deeper in things like the page 2 settings, which we'll come to a bit later on, I'm sure, with Matt's amazing playing. Obviously, Matt, is an integral part of Jamiroquai. You've been the band's key player for about 2 decades, is that right? I think. Yeah, so you've been in the band a long time, and you've obviously done a lot of amazing stuff with the sequential, and also you've done a video recently with the Oberheim OB-X8 as well, which probably a lot of people have already seen. So yeah, without further ado, I'd like to invite you up onto the stage. Welcome, Matt Johnson.
I'm getting my wind cheeks.
So yeah, obviously, when it comes to it, the spec obviously of the synth, it's an 8-voice sort of full analog poly synth. It'll give you bitimbral use, so you can basically layer up lots of different sounds and get kind of really fat, unique sounds with it, but also be able to create kind of very much your own unique sound. I think that's a really, really important thing. It does ship with 400 presets, but also does come with the original presets, which Marcus Ryle was able to find the original tapes for the unit. But I think what's great with the synth is that he's able to sort of create very much your own sound with that, not just sort of working with it just as a classic. But as I said, I really don't want to sound like I'm here giving a sales pitch. We've got the product specialists upstairs, so after we've finished on stage, you can have some hands-on with the unit. If you've got any sort of really deep questions on the synth, we will be around afterwards to be able to go through it. So yeah, Matt, I'm sure everyone knows of yourself and the work you do, but yeah, can you just give us an overview of what you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've managed to avoid having a proper job now for about 30 years. And for the last 20 years I've been keyboard player at Jamiroquai, and I've co-written a lot of material with the band in that time. I also co-produced the last record called Automaton, and we've been around the world several times over. I've also worked with a lot of artists during that period and before as a session player and a writer, and I've had some success doing that as well. So recently I've been working with a guy called Purple Disco Machine, who's a big DJ, writing some songs with him, which have done very well. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing, and then I guess COVID hit a couple of years ago, and it was a bit of a game changer for all musicians. So I kind of luckily started doing these videos, which some of you may have seen on YouTube, and just kind of really took off. Surprisingly, I didn't really expect it to take off, to be honest. My wife was like, "You should do that." I was like, "No, it's not me. It's not my thing," because I'm not like a particularly show-off type guy, I'd say. But I started doing them, and people seem to react really well to them, so that's kind of become a bit of a thing as well, and it's a nice way of being able to communicate with people and give something back sometimes as well, with some tips and playing and stuff. Yeah, I guess that pretty much puts me up to date.
That's great. I mean, with the way that the channel came about, you've done some work with some sequential. Is a lot of the sort of content that you create, is that off your own back, or is a lot of that with brands like us, for example?
Most of it's off my own back. Yeah, sometimes I've done sponsorship videos, but by and large, like even the Profit one, I just did myself. I shoot it all myself. I edit it myself, which is why you might see the odd blurry bit of footage. You do a whole day of shooting, then you look back and go, oh Christ, it's like out of focus all day long. But it's fun. It's fun.
And obviously in the studio you've got some really nice but very choice bits in there. I mean, have you got quite a big selection of classic synths as well as new stuff? I mean, what's your sort of your studio predominantly made up of?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of the two, really. I've got loads of classic synths. I've got Jupiter 8, Mini Moog Model D, original Oberheim OB-X8, Pro 1, you know, quite a few things like that I've got kicking around. And I suppose more and more of these modern synths, to the point where I'm looking at them now and going like, I really need to get rid of some of them. They're taking up a lot of room.
And is that quite a similar setup that you use when you're touring and working with other artists in sessions? I mean, or is that a different kind of rig that you like to use?
Yeah, I mean, my tour rig is slightly different. I've got like a Fender Rhodes Mark I suitcase, and above that I have a Yamaha Montage 6, which is connected to a OB-X8 desktop version, so they go together. And then on the right hand side I've got a Yamaha Montage 8 and a Prophet 6. So that's at the moment been my live rig, you know, which sounds great. And then studio stuff, these days people mostly send me their tracks, and I don't really meet the artist, you know, and I kind of quite like it like that. It's one of these things that's happened since COVID, but the good thing about it is, like, when you do a session, when you're with someone, they get impatient and they want you to just come up with a track in 3 or 4 hours, whereas I'll spend 2 days happily on a track, you know, and so actually the artist gets much better results when I go more deep into the sounds. You know.
Do you think, yeah, I mean, that's interesting, yeah, that remote working, there's quite a lot of people that are using kind of things like audio movers and lots of other ways to connect to other studios, but yeah, it's interesting sort of giving you the extra creative space rather than being sort of put on the spot to perform, basically.
Yeah, I like it like that, and then if they're not happy, I happily redo it, you know, but usually they are happy.
That's awesome. So the OB-X8, obviously a lot of people here have probably already seen the video. What is your honest opinion of the synth?
Well, like I said, I liked it a lot more than I expected to. When I got it, I thought, oh, well, I'll get it and I'll program some sounds for it, you know, and make a video. But having had it for a while, and I've got the original tends to sit in its flight case quite a lot because it's just so huge, you know, and when I'm doing a session, sometimes I just feel like, I really can't be bothered to take it out because it's very big and heavy. And so this, for me, has the same sound, but so much more options in terms of programmability. You know, I mean, it's a very fine line about these vintage things, you know, because you've got 40 years of electricity going through a thing. Will give it a slightly more wonky vibe, maybe, but I feel like the essence of the sound in this is the same sound, and I think it's. I'm not a technical person, but I think it's to do with having a card for each voice, you know, and those little differences between each card is what makes it sound so warm and fat. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of my questions was like, do you think it's true to the original sound? But I think you've answered it very much.
Yeah, I definitely do. You know, I mean, I know Marcus Riley did some videos with the presets and matching them up, but I thought it would be interesting to do that with one of my own patches, and I did it, and I could get the same patch, and I think it'd be very hard to say which one was which. Yeah,
no, I think it's really interesting because there's a lot of people obviously think, it's just the legacy kind of workflow. I mean, obviously with the OB-X8 being very true to the OB series and its sort of layout, do you think there is space and for you or artists to basically use a kind of classic in a modern workflow? I mean, is it just for people who want to recreate a sound, or can they create something new on it?
Yeah, I think you definitely can. You know, it's like I say, I think this one is much more flexible than any of the vintage ones. You know, because it is capable of a lot more tones. Certainly than my OB-X8. You know, there's a lot more you can do with it. And I think, you know, it doesn't matter a modern track. You hear loads of modern tracks. They have maybe a signature, very warm sound in them somewhere. You know, so it's all about artistic intention for me. That, you know, it's not just like you could only make 80s music on this. You know, you can make any kind of music you want. I think just depends on your imagination.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think a lot of people have been very nostalgic about the instrument, but then actually sort of hearing the possibilities, it's refreshing to see new makers and artists sort of come into the synth with a different outlook rather than just trying to recreate that famous stab or pad. You know?
Yeah, I mean, what I think about it is like you wouldn't buy this synth to make crazy sound design kinds of sounds. You know, it's quite basic, and it's horses for courses. You buy this for its absolute sublime sound quality. You know, that's what you get from this. You know, absolute like top of the range analog sound, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that was again a lot of the feedback we've had from sort of taking the synth out to various shows since its release. You know, like you said, that kind of classic fat Oberheim sound. You know, the oscillators and the voices kind of not fighting with each other, but they're kind of working with each other, and then you get that kind of really magic sort of space. I know we were chatting about the X8, but we were saying about like the four voices left and right, you know, and that kind of massive stacked sound that you get from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's more flexible on this as well with that, because you can, it's more easily assignable. If OB-X8, you have to open the thing up and like move 8 levers around to get it in different places in the pan spectrum, which is a bit of a pain in the ass, to say the least.
Yeah, certainly not a speedy operation. What is your favourite example of the Oberheim sound? Like, what acts did you look at and think
I think I'm going to have to say Prince, you know, because I'm a massive, obviously I'm a funk lover, and you know, they're so iconic, some of those early 80s stuff, and it was all done on Oberheim. And he didn't mess around with them that much, actually. He just opened the filter all the way up, made them real bright and buzzy, and then just played the hell out of them, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting. We sort of were creating a playlist for this evening, sort of for the backing, and actually going through kind of, you know, looking on your average sort of Google search of, you know, the Oberheim playlist, and it's amazing. Actually, we were saying earlier the amount of records that actually have got it on, and you instantly recognise it. You know,
I'm definitely not going to say Jump though.
We're not going to mention it. So 50p in the jar, please. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so we don't want it just to be me talking all night. So has anyone got any questions straight away? Jump in. Any good questions from Matt? Yeah, if you don't want to ask, maybe something comes to mind, jump in, but also afterwards, by all means, come and find us if you want to come and ask things. Yeah, one of the things that I think was important really for seeing kind of what you were going to do is basically your performance. So tonight we've got obviously a bit of a setup here that you brought along. Can you just talk us through your setup tonight? So what's going on? You've got what is this, a pedal? It's a looper?
Yeah, it's called a hologram microcosm. It's like a reverb, granular sort of reverb pedal, but I'm really just using it mainly as a looper pedal tonight, because I thought, you know, you come to hear the synth, the best thing to do is maybe just hear the synth for a couple of tracks, and you can really hear what it sounds like. So I'm going to try and loop some things, which may go right, may go wrong. We'll find out later on. And then I've just got a laptop, so I'm going to do a couple of tracks and play with a backing track as well.
Awesome. And then, so what sound source are you using on the synth? Obviously, you've just done, as people know probably with the video, you have done your own bank, haven't you, for the X8, the OB-X8, which you're selling?
I have, yeah. They're all my own sounds. I mean, I'm someone that I just like to tailor the sounds to my own style of playing. So, yeah, first thing I do anytime I get synth is sit and program it for a week or two, and try and get something out of it. Yeah. I
mean, it's funny sort of referencing the video again, but kind of hearing the very different sounds that you created. It's really interesting sort of seeing that kind of quite ambient, spaced out kind of vibe, but then a lot more kind of upfront, classic kind of sound as well. It's interesting to sort of see you, working with those sort of types of sound.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with the Oberheim, the obvious thing to do is just have two oscillators on a sawtooth and detune them, and straight away it sounds great. It does sound really good. But then, obviously, when you start diving a bit deeper, you can come up with a lot of different tones out of it. That's where the page 2 really comes in. Personally, I really like the page 2 features. Because it just brings a hell of a lot more into the thing.
Yeah, I mean, again, sorry, you've probably already seen about the page 2, and a lot of people reference it. Obviously, it's a way to be able to dig a lot deeper into the synth. So, for example, you might change the filter or an envelope. There's things in there that actually were on the original, but also there's sort of new features there as well, I think, as well. And things like allocating the voices. There's lots of different customization that you can do on the synth. And it's just, nice, really easy to use menu. I know it's not menu diving, and it's not menu diving heavy, but it's useful having a screen, albeit small, but there is a screen there to be able to delve into those features. What's your kind of feature that you're I don't know, most pleased or use a lot more probably with having that screen there?
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple things like being able to delay when the LFOs come in. You know, also like you mentioned about the unison. You know, the assigning the voices. It's a very simple thing again. But on my OB-X8, if you go into mono mode, it's 8 voices. There's no choice about that. And that's kind of not that flexible in a way because it's just a massive sound, which can be good, but a lot of the time isn't what you want. You know, so it's great that you can tailor that. You can just what other features have you got? You've got an interesting one where the pulse width modulation speeds up the LFO so it can get faster as it goes. Things like that sort of do make it sound a bit more you know, you can do more involved sounds with that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I think, well, it's interesting. So with the pedal then, so I think, yeah, to give people a bit of visibility, we've got obviously mic set up, so you can probably talk us through some of the bits you're going to do. Probably a great opportunity to jump into the performance section.
Okay.
There you go, jumping tonight. But, and again, if there's any other questions after that, oh, there is some questions, yeah, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, like, when you program a patch,
Yeah.
do you do it with a track in mind, or do you just go for something that you find inspiring for each client?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It's a bit of both sometimes, you know. Normally, when I'm doing I've decided to do a bank of sounds, first few days I will just sort of randomly start programming a patch, just see what, you know, it suddenly might make itself apparent, if you know what I mean. You know, you hit a sweet spot and think, oh yeah, that sounds good, and then you go down that road. And then, you know, you probably end up doing 20 sounds that, you know, you might do 20 pads, and then you realise, yeah, but it's, you know, okay, all we've got is pads at the moment. then you start thinking, okay, well, there's certain classic sounds that I always try to make, like the Oberheim classic one is the Lyle Mays patch. You know, Lyle Mays is a great jazz keyboard player, and he always used the same sound, and it was on an Oberheim 4-voice. And it's one of these classic sounds that's quite hard to get right, you know. So things like that I'll always try and make. I'll always try and make a sound that sounds like the Mini Moog, because I love the Mini Moog, you know, and I just feel like those are things that people always puts a smile on your face, you know, if you hear something that sounds quite authentically Stevie Wonder or whatever, even though that normally wasn't a Mini Moog actually, but you know what I mean, that kind of vintage sound. I like to program a lot of those up, and then I might start messing around more later on and, you know, go a bit more wild. But I always try to make them usable, you know, so that it's not just like, it always used to annoy me when, you know, especially back in the day, these days it's got a bit better, but back in the day you buy a synth and then you just press, you know, patch number one's called Universe, you know, you just press one note and it goes forever, you know, and it's like, yeah, it's great, but can you actually use it in anything, you know? So I try to make usable sounds, basically.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
The Automaton album from Jamiroquai had really quite a different sound to it.
Yes.
Was that something you brought to it, or was that, you know?
I guess it was in a way, yeah, because I was sort of working with some young artists before starting that album with Jay, and you know, I was listening to a lot of modern music because of that, you know, so I'd been producing modern music, and then what happened was we started writing together. We booked in a 1-month writing session, and it was really inspiring, you know, and Jay sort of got into that vibe, because it was just the two of us. It would always be like a drum machine or something, and we had a whole room of synths. Jay's got an incredible synth collection, like way better than mine, you know, very rare synths, and so we just go around these synths, and we started to get very inspired by that. So I think I started that more modern process, and my production style is a bit more modern sometimes, you know, although I like retro stuff, obviously. But he really got into that, and the actual track Automaton was really driven by him more than anything. It originally was a lot less, angular sounding than how it ended up. You know, he really pushed that because he had the lyric, and he was really driven by the lyric. So that was like real artistic intent, making it that so electronic.
Any other questions? Again, oh, yeah.
I have a question, I think it's kind of covered. Do you have any synth practices in the same sense that like if you're practicing an instrument, you would run scales, or sorry, and like a piano, we have run scales or something.
Yeah.
Is there anything like that for synthesis that you need to forefront?
I mean, yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think it's all part of the same thing. You know, you've got to practice playing the keyboard, whether it's a synth or, you know, a piano. Obviously, I think the main thing with synths is trying to marry the player and the sound. You know what I mean? Because sometimes people might be really good players, but they're not necessarily sympathetic to the sound that they're playing. So they'll, you know, trying to find an example, like, you know, you're on a pad sound, but you're playing it like a piano, and it's going to sound shit, you know, basically. So it's like, you have to think about what story the sound is saying to you, and try to be sympathetic with it. That's the way I look at it, anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
The character between the OB-X and the OB-X8, is it big?
The difference, you mean?
Yeah, do you know if it's...
It's subtle.
Oh.
It is subtle, but it's there. You know, it's like the filters. I mean, one of the very cool things about this synth is just definitely the fact that you've got all those different filter types in it.
Oh, even the early
Yeah, because it's got the sort of high pass filters and the notch filter, which actually sound really good. They all sound really good, and they all do sound a bit different. So
even
it's
changing like the LFO flavour.
Oh, yeah.
Too. You can get
Yeah.
the different machines, and you know Marcus Ryle apparently spent a lot of time looking at the originals in his studio and like, well, why does it act in that way, and how can we replicate that? And I think that's where that passion has come from, the people that were originally involved, you know, in the kind of in that period of time, sort of early '80s and so on. It's a really interesting point. But yeah, to getting those different characters, I think it's again where you make something quite unique with it as well.
Yeah, because you can mix and match. Do you know what I mean? Like, because like the envelopes as well. I mean, I think they're probably digitally controlled, but they've emulated exactly the curves of two different synths, and they do react really differently. And you find with ADSR, like it depends on the curve, how much attack you get out of a sound and things like that. They feel really different, you know, depending on the curve. So stuff like that you basically don't have on the vintage thing. Yeah.
Put my mind at rest now. It's bothering me all along.
Definitely have some hands on with it, and you'll be able to listen to it yourself for sure.
Yeah, you can play later.
Thank you.
Definitely. Any other questions? Yeah.
What would you say to people? I mean, before you had the OB-X8, you were probably or possibly unsure of what to expect. You know, you've got high expectations, and when it compared with the vintage version, you know, were your expectations met or exceeded in terms of the comparison between the two?
Yeah, I think they were exceeded, really. Yeah, definitely. Like I say, I can sit them next to each other, and it's funny, you know, with this vintage gear, there is a lot of nostalgia attached with it, obviously, and your mind can play tricks on you in a way, you know. But if I hit a note on that and I hit one on the OB-X8, basically it sounds exactly the same, really, you know. It's like I said, the only difference I can find is maybe 40 years of electricity might have thrown the other one slightly more out of kilter. But you've got the vintage knob on this to sort of emulate that as well. And what I quite like about the vintage knob on this one is it's quite subtle. It's not really extreme. It's quite sensible. You know.
I think a lot of people are, you know, saying if they've had machines that haven't been regularly serviced, like 30 years old, and then they
like my one.
no comment. But no, that's it. And I think it's interesting, like hearing how they all act differently or sound differently, but to hear that it's sort of true to that original, I think it's really positive to hear that from the users. I think that's one thing as well, just to note really, you know, the Oberheim team and sequential team, they really want to hear from their users. You know, they want to understand if there's a feature they like, or, you know, there's any changes. I think when Marcus and the team and Tom worked on this, it was very much, you know, true to a lot of the originals. But yeah, they really do listen to like the social media feeds, and they want to understand kind of what people want. So I think with any of the products that Sequential and Oberheim make, it's, you know, they want to connect. So do follow the socials for that input. Any other questions before we start? Yeah. No, go for it.
Wouldn't this be more close to the original because it's old, 40 years, like you say, the electricity, But back then,
Oh, yeah, what it sounded like then. Yeah, probably is. I think you're probably
that's
right
what
there.
I
Yeah,
started to think.
I think you're right.
That's what it did sound like.
Yeah, it's like the same as like with Fender Rhodes. I'm quite into Fender Rhodes stuff. You know, it's like the way they sound now is different from what they sounded, and you can hear it actually if you listen to some of these sort of records. How they sounded then was a lot more clean and, you know, more together than a battered 40-year-old one.
Yeah. And survival of these probably better.
It's hard to say. Anyone should look after any instrument. To be fair, I mean, road ready and things like that. I think with the sort of the modern production processes, I think that's really what's great with a brand like Sequential and folks like Group working together, you know, with Tom and the team. You know, just if there's certain things that they can do, you know, in a slightly different way or what have you, then I think that's one of the big things that we as a group can offer. You know, which I think is positive because the products are studio and road ready.
That's a good question, actually. Not particularly occurred to me before. I mean, the reason that some of the old vintage synths have survived so long is because they use simple, discrete components, transistors, not a lot of very large scale integration. Whereas like a DX7, once that dies, it's going to die because you can't get those chips from Yamaha anymore. Do these use anything that's particularly esoteric in the construction? Or are these going to,
I mean, not
have basic stuff in them?
Yeah.
I've not opened one up. So
Yeah, I mean, I said, I'm not going to guess. I mean, I think they were very true to the design where possible, but then if there were other elements of it, then they were sort of courteous to use things. It was interesting, like the buttons and switches, they were still able to source the buttons that they were able to source. And I know you've probably seen that anecdote. It's like people say, oh, these are just recreated. Like, no, they literally still had them on the shelf. So stuff like that's quite interesting. But I think, this is where, Sequential and Dave Smith's team really were able to sort of say, well, hey, we've got this, collection of components and parts. But for further detail, find one of our specialists. Come in, pick our brains. But they're definitely, it's an interesting sort of way to recreate these instruments. Any other questions?
Real question, but
Yeah.
thanks for the videos. I mean, it really helped me decide to buy a Profit. So I'm a bit worried this is going to be expensive.
Don't blame me. You're happy with the Profit?
Very.
Yeah, it's a great keyboard. It's a great keyboard. Well, the Profit 10 you got?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they're fantastic. Yeah, well, no, it's a pleasure. I mean, look, I always try to be honest. I never do a video about something that I really hate and say I love it. I just, life's way too short to do that, So it's sincere.
Have you ever come across a product that you haven't liked and thought, I'm not going to do a video on that, and it's just rubbish?
Yeah, I mean, there's things I see. I mean, I played it. I mean, I'm not going to say what they are because I'm just not into, slagging things off. But there's some keyboards I've played in studios that people have gone on about. I thought, actually, it doesn't do it for me at all. Then I just won't bother really. So I naturally find the things that are of interest to me. Yeah.
Will there be a desktop module version of the oberheim, or is that something that?
Do you think? Would you like one?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for people who don't have enough.
I think, to sort of, really stress the point. The Oberheim brand is back and new products are being worked on. I think that's really interesting. There's been a lot of input. People say, if they've gone near the OB-X, then we could do this, we could have that, this machine, this particular synth. The focus really is we are working on new things. Keep following what we're doing. That's again exciting for us to work for the group to be able to hear that. Watch this space. I think it's the best thing to see what products will come. And again, jump on the forums. Start a conversation, join in the conversation with people. They are listening, and I mean the uptake really from seeing the brands, coming back out, having social media reach. People are like, oh my goodness, Oberheim is back. So they are listening. So watch this space. New products are on their way.
Standard.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
For you, how do you find the difference between the mode filters and the Oberheim? Obviously, back in the day with the SEM, the mode filter and the Oberheim filters were two of the classic legendary ones.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of the current mode stuff, and I remain in awe of how the sweeps for me feel so similar to the old ones. And you know, do you feel that Oberheim has, you know, with these current ones, do you feel the sweeps are the same for you? And how do you feel like it compares to the Moog gear?
Yeah, I do feel the sweeps are the same on the new one, definitely. They're very different filters. Like the filters are a lot weaker on these in a way, you know. But that's their character and that's their charm. Like the resonance doesn't go into oscillation, self-oscillation on the Oberheim, any of the Oberheim gear, old or new. And that's kind of its charm, that you can turn the resonance right up and you get this kind of real sweet sound that we all kind of know, whether we know or not that we know it. Whereas the Moog, you know, has a much more snappy, sort of very strong filter, which I also love. You know, I've got quite a few Moog things. I've got an original mini Moog, I've got Voyager, and I've got a Moog 1. And they're equally great, you know, they both sound great. The reason you end up getting different synths is they've all got slightly different characters, you know what I mean? And then they're good for different things. That's why I collect them, because, you know, a lot of it is practical. I do a lot of sessions and then I just try to think, okay, what's the best sound for this song? So, you know, sometimes you pull it out and it's completely the wrong thing. But in terms of, does it sound authentic? Does it sound as fat as the original? Yeah, definitely. Filtered, absolutely 100%.
Any other questions? Cool. Okay. Well, I'll hand over to you now. Okay. Yeah, I said afterwards we'll jump back in and see other questions that sort of jumped in someone's head or maybe questions.